ever find yourself asking, like, why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah.
It's like this question that's been around forever.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's a question that Rabbi Harold Kushner really wrestled with in his book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People.
Yeah.
So today we're going to like dive deep into his ideas.
Okay.
And explore not just like possible answers, but also like where those answers kind of fall short.
Yeah.
So get ready, because some of these ideas might challenge, you know, what you already think.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a deep dive, for sure.
Yeah.
That makes us face some, like, uncomfortable truths about suffering and our place, you know, in the universe and everything.
Absolutely. And Kushner's own journey with this started with a, like, really personal tragedy.
Right.
His son, Aaron, was diagnosed with progeria.
Yes.
It's this rare, fatal condition that causes rapid aging.
Right.
So imagine, like, being a parent, a man of faith, and you get news like that.
Yeah.
Kushner talks about this feeling of just overwhelming unfairness, you know?
Right, yeah.
Questioning God's justice.
Yeah.
And I think that's something a lot of us can relate to, right?
Oh, absolutely.
When life throws you a curveball, it's natural to ask, like, why me? Or why them, you know?
Yeah, and what's so powerful about Kushner's writing is that he doesn't shy away from those raw emotions, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't try to sugarcoat the pain. He doesn't offer these simple platitudes.
Right.
He really, like, jumps right in to the heart of the struggle. And he acknowledges the anger and the confusion.
Right.
The sense of betrayal even that can come with suffering.
Absolutely. And he uses this really powerful example to kind of illustrate this.
Okay.
He tells this story of an Israeli mother who cries on her son's birthday. Not out of sadness, but because it means he's a year closer to mandatory military service.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it's this, like, anticipatory grief.
Right.
This awareness that life is fragile.
Right.
And I think that resonates with all of us, you know?
Absolutely.
We know that bad things can happen, and sometimes that fear of those bad things happening is a kind of suffering itself.
Absolutely. And it's in those moments of fear and uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
That we often turn to those traditional explanations for suffering.
Yeah.
Trying to make sense of what seems senseless.
Absolutely. And one of the most common explanations is the idea that suffering is like punishment for sin.
Right.
Kushner even quotes Proverbs, which states, "No ills befall the righteous, but the wicked are filled with trouble."
Right.
But then he puts that up against the reality that good people experience hardship all the time.
Right. Right.
It's not this neat cause and effect, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And clinging to that belief that suffering is punishment can have some really harmful consequences. Kushner shares a story about a couple who lost their daughter to a sudden illness.
Right.
And they were just consumed by guilt.
Yeah.
Convinced that because they hadn't fasted on Yom Kippur, God was punishing them.
Right.
It's heartbreaking, right? Because this belief, instead of comforting them, just added another layer of pain to their grief.
Yeah. It underscores the danger, really, of trying to find that direct connection, right, between our actions and the suffering we experience.
Right.
Because it can lead to, you know, you blame yourself.
Right.
And you get this distorted view of God.
Yeah.
Right, as this vengeful figure.
Instead of offering comfort, it reinforces this idea that we're somehow in control.
Right.
That if we just do all the right things,
right,
we can avoid pain and tragedy.
Right.
But life doesn't work that way.
No.
Yeah.
So if we can't always understand suffering through this lens of, you know, divine retribution, what other explanations are there?
Yeah.
Kushner looks at some possibilities.
Right.
And he brings in the work of Thornton Wilder, who in his novel, The Bridge of San Luis Rey, seems to suggest that maybe there's a right time to die.
Okay.
Like each of the characters who die in the bridge collapse had resolved some major life issue. So it's like they were ready to go.
Right, right. But what's interesting is that Wilder himself later moves away from this, like, neat conclusion, you know?
Yeah.
In his later novel, The Eighth Day, he uses this metaphor of a tapestry to show how complex life and suffering are. He says, you know, from the underside, the threads look chaotic.
Right.
But from the front, they make this intricate, beautiful pattern.
Right.
So it's like this comforting thought that maybe our suffering has a purpose that we just can't grasp yet.
A lovely metaphor, but I gotta say, I'm a little skeptical.
Yeah.
Have you ever actually seen this grand tapestry?
Right.
You know, the one that makes sense of it all?
It's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
But it does raise some questions, right? If there is this grand design, why is it so hidden from us?
Right.
Why do we have to go through so much pain and confusion before we can see the beauty in it?
Right. It feels a bit like, just trust that it all makes sense in the end.
Yeah.
Which can be frustrating when you're in the middle of suffering.
Absolutely.
And it also doesn't account for the sheer randomness of so many tragedies. Think of a plane crash, for instance. Can we really say that every person on that plane was meant to die at that exact moment? Like, were their lives all woven into this grand tapestry?
It's a tough one.
It is a tough question.
Yeah.
And it leads us to another common explanation. The idea that suffering is like a test, God's way of teaching us, like how a parent disciplines a child.
Right.
Kushner uses this analogy of a parent pulling a child away from danger or like refusing to give him a candy bar before dinner.
Yeah. And on the surface, it makes sense, right?
Right.
We learn and grow from challenges.
But what are we supposed to learn from a random accident?
Right.
Or a child's illness?
Yeah.
What lesson could ever justify that kind of pain?
Kushner quotes Harriet Schiff, a parent who lost her son.
Right.
And she says, if only I was a weaker person, Robbie would still be alive.
Wow.
And it's such a powerful statement. It shows how emotionally damaging it can be to believe that your strength is being tested through tragedy. It can make you feel guilty, like your suffering is because you're somehow inadequate.
It's like saying, if you had just been a better person, this wouldn't have happened. And that's a lot to carry.
It is. And it makes you wonder, why would God choose to teach us in such awful ways? Wouldn't there be kinder ways to help us grow?
So if we move away from these ideas of punishment and these deliberate lessons, are we left with the unsettling possibility that some things just happen randomly? That there's no rhyme or reason to it all?
That's a question that Kushner grapples with, too. Can we accept that there's randomness in the universe? Can we reconcile that with our belief in a just and loving God?
Yeah, it's tough.
It is.
We crave order. We look for patterns. We want to believe there's a reason for everything. But what if sometimes there isn't? What if sometimes it's just chance?
Take mass shootings, for example.
Okay.
While we can look at the shooter's motives, the victims are often in the wrong place at the wrong time. Just by pure chance. It wasn't fate. It wasn't part of some big plan. It was random.
Let's say with natural disasters, right? We understand the science behind them, but the path of destruction can seem so arbitrary. One house is destroyed, the one next to is fine. It feels random. Unfair. And hard to accept.
Which leads to a key idea that Kushner explores the concept of natural laws. Operating without regard for a person's goodness.
He emphasizes that the laws of physics, biology, nature in general, they're consistent. They don't make exceptions for good people.
Exactly. Gravity doesn't care if you're a saint or a sinner.
And this consistency, while it makes our world predictable and safe in many ways, it also means that tragedy can strike anyone at any time.
It's like that saying, lightning doesn't strike the same place twice, but it can strike anywhere once.
He even uses a bit of humor here. He compares our modern skepticism about miracles to a child reimagining the Red Sea parting with fighter jets and pontoon bridges. Like, we live in a world where those biblical miracles seem less believable because we understand that natural laws are remarkably consistent. Which leads to a really thought-provoking question. Would the world be better if good people were somehow immune to natural laws? If they were shielded from accidents, diseases, natural disasters. It's something to think about.
It is. On the surface, it's tempting to say yes, of course. But it gets complicated. It would mean divine favoritism. And we've seen throughout history how systems like that can be abused and lead to all sorts of injustices.
So if we're accepting that natural laws apply to everyone, no matter how good they are, does that mean we're also accepting that pain and suffering are just inevitable parts of being human?
That's a question that Kushner really digs into.
Yeah.
And while he acknowledges that pain is unpleasant, he suggests it serves a vital purpose.
Okay.
He uses the example of children with familial dysautonomia.
Okay.
It's a condition that keeps them from feeling pain.
So it sounds like a superpower, right?
Right.
But it's actually really dangerous.
It is.
Because they don't have that crucial warning system that pain provides.
Exactly.
Pain signals danger.
Right, yeah.
It tells us something's wrong. It's not about punishment. It's about survival.
And this idea of pain as a warning system applies to emotional pain, too. It's connected to our ability to make meaning, to understand the world.
And our place in it.
So he contrasts the physical pain of passing a kidney stone with the pain of childbirth. Both can be excruciating.
Oh, yeah.
But childbirth has this transformative element to it, right?
It does. It leads to something profound, something meaningful. It changes you physically and emotionally.
And this brings us to another interesting point that Kushner makes.
Okay.
The idea of mortality. And how knowing that our time is limited actually gives our lives meaning. He brings in these contrasting examples from literature, like Calypso in the Odyssey, who envies Ulysses' mortality because it makes his life have weight, And then he contrasts that with the immortals in Gulliver's Travels who are utterly miserable because they outlive everyone, everything they love.
Yeah. Their lives are just this endless cycle of loss and grief with none of that urgency or meaning that comes with knowing that our time is limited.
Makes you think, if we lived forever, would our choices even matter? Would we strive for anything or just float aimlessly through an endless amount of time?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does.
If it's the finite nature of life that actually drives our desire for meaning, for connection, for leaving our mark on the world.
Absolutely. So we've explored all these different ways of trying to understand suffering, punishment, divine lessons, randomness, the role of pain, even how mortality plays into it. But there's another piece we haven't talked about yet. Prayer. Where does that fit into all of this? Especially when we're wrestling with those big questions like, if God is good, why does he let bad things happen?
It's a question that comes up a lot, right?
It does.
When people are going through tough times. If God is all-powerful and loving.
Why doesn't he step in and prevent these tragedies? And if he doesn't, what's the point of even praying?
I think a lot of us have been there, right? That late-night phone call, someone you love is in crisis. And the first thing you do is ask people to pray. It's like we're hoping that if enough of us plead, we can somehow influence the outcome. Maybe even change God's mind.
It's a natural instinct, I think, to reach for something, anything that might offer some hope in a dark moment. And prayer can be such a powerful way to express that fear, that longing, that desperate need for comfort and support.
But what happens when those prayers don't seem to be answered? Does that shake our faith? Does it make us doubt God's goodness? Kushner offers a really insightful perspective on this. He says that while prayer can't guarantee miracles, it can offer a different kind of help.
I'm curious.
What does he mean by that?
Well, he draws on the work of Emil Durkheim, this sociologist, who said that the main function of religion is to connect us to each other. And rituals, including prayer, they create this framework for us to share experiences, especially in times of joy and sorrow.
So it's like those rituals, those shared acts of prayer, give people a tangible way to show they care and support each other. It's not so much about changing God's mind, but strengthening those human connections. Reminding us we're not alone in our pain.
And Kushner points to some specific examples from the Jewish tradition that illustrate this beautifully. Like the custom of sitting Shiva.
Okay.
That 7-day mourning period
Yeah.
that Jewish families observe after a death.
For those who aren't familiar with sitting Shiva, it's not about isolating yourself in grief.
No.
It's about the community coming together
Right.
to support those who are mourning,
Right.
offering comfort,
Yeah.
sharing stories,
Yeah.
helping them navigate those first overwhelming days of loss.
And then there's the tradition of the meal of replenishment.
Right.
Where friends and neighbors bring food to those who are grieving, making sure they're taken care of when they might not be able to take care of themselves.
Right.
It's a beautiful symbol of the community stepping in to give practical and emotional support.
And even the mourner's Kaddish.
Right.
That prayer, recited for 11 months after a death, is often said in a congregation.
Right.
So it's not just a personal expression of grief, but a communal act that acknowledges the loss and affirms that life and faith go on.
All of these rituals, these shared practices, they reinforce the idea that even in grief, we're connected to something bigger than ourselves. We're part of a community that cares, that understands, that will walk with us through those dark times.
It's powerful stuff.
It is.
And it makes me think about how prayer, in this context, isn't about begging for favors or demanding specific outcomes. It's about opening ourselves up to a deeper connection, both with God and with each other.
Exactly.
And that can be incredibly healing on its own. It helps us tap into strength and resilience that we might not even know we have.
So if we're shifting our understanding of prayer away from this transactional model, what does that mean for our relationship with God? How do we approach prayer in a way that feels real and meaningful?
Kushner suggests that instead of trying to bargain with God, we focus on seeking strength and guidance.
He uses a really interesting example from the book of Genesis. He compares two prayers spoken by Jacob at different points in his life.
You're talking about the story where Jacob wrestles with the angel, right?
Yes, exactly. The first prayer is when Jacob's a young man running from his brother Esau, full of fear and uncertainty. And he basically makes a deal with God. If you protect me and make me successful, then I'll be your faithful servant.
Very transactional.
Very conditional. Like, he's trying to make a bargain.
Like, you do this for me, God, and I'll do that for you.
But 20 years later, after Jacob's gone through good times and bad, his prayer is completely different. He acknowledges God's goodness, admits his own faults, and just asks for help in a difficult situation.
So it's a much humbler prayer.
It is.
He's not dictating terms or demanding specific outcomes.
No.
He's simply recognizing that he needs guidance and support.
And Kushner says that's the kind of prayer that God responds to.
Interesting.
It's not about demanding or expecting certain results, but opening ourselves to that deeper connection and finding the courage to move forward even when we're afraid.
That makes sense.
It's
like acknowledging we don't have all the answers. That we need help. That we're willing to trust in something bigger than ourselves. Even if we don't fully understand it.
He emphasizes that we can't just pray our problems away. Life is going to be messy and challenging no matter how devout we are. But prayer can help us find that strength to face those challenges with courage and grace.
It's not about escaping the storm, but weathering it with a sense of hope and resilience.
Exactly.
And that brings us back to this question of finding meaning in suffering. If it's not a punishment, if it's not a test, if it's not part of some big divine plan, does it have any meaning at all?
It's the question that lingers, isn't it?
It does.
If we let go of all those neat explanations, are we left with meaninglessness?
Kushner acknowledges the difficulty of this. But he ultimately argues that we have the power to create meaning from our experiences, even the most painful ones.
He shares a powerful story about Martin Gray, a Holocaust survivor who lost his family in a fire.
I've heard of Martin Gray. He wrote a book about his experience, didn't he?
He did. And what's so remarkable is that instead of getting lost in blame and despair, he chose to focus on preventing future fires. He became a firefighter. Dedicating his life to helping others.
That's amazing.
It's an incredible example of turning tragedy into positive action.
It's like he refused to let suffering define him. to have the final word.
Right.
He chose to create meaning from it.
Uh-huh.
To make his pain into something purposeful and life-affirming.
Right. And this leads Kushner to bring up this concept from theologian Dorothy Soule called the devil's martyrs.
That's a pretty stark image.
Yeah.
Who are the devil's martyrs?
They are those whose suffering leads them to despair, to lose faith in others, in God, in the goodness of the world.
So it's like their suffering becomes proof that life is meaningless.
Right, like a kind of anti-miracle.
Right.
And Kushner suggests that we have a choice in how we respond to suffering.
Right.
We can let it break us, or we can find ways to make it a testament to resilience and love and hope.
So it's not about pretending the pain isn't there or that it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's about choosing how we incorporate it into our lives.
Right.
How we let it shape us.
Which brings us to a really important question. If God doesn't cause or prevent suffering, what is his role?
Yeah.
Where is he in all of this?
It's the question so many people get hung up on, right?
It is. If God isn't actively intervening, does that mean he's distant? Uncaring?
Kushner suggests that maybe God's presence is revealed in different ways. Maybe not through big miracles, but through the subtle ways that good comes out of even the darkest situations.
He offers some really thought-provoking examples, like how we've eradicated diseases through human ingenuity. Could we see those medical breakthroughs as divinely inspired? A testament to our God-given ability to solve problems and show compassion.
It's a different way of thinking about God's role. Maybe it's not about direct intervention, but about empowering us to be agents of healing and change in the world.
And he also points to acts of selflessness and courage in the face of tragedy. Those times when people overcome their own fear and pain to help others, to offer comfort, to rebuild. It's like we catch a glimpse of that divine spark inside us.
And even our own capacity for empathy. To be outraged by injustice. That reflects a moral compass. That aligns with a God who cares about righteousness and compassion.
Absolutely.
So maybe God's presence isn't always about what he prevents. But about what he inspires. What he calls forth from within us.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. It leads us to a deeper understanding of faith. One that doesn't run from the tough questions. But finds God in the messy reality of human experience.
I love that. It's not blind acceptance.
Oh, no.
It's about grappling with these hard truths.
And
finding a way to hold on to hope. Even when the world feels chaotic and unfair.
And maybe that struggle, that questioning, trying to make sense of our faith, and the reality of suffering, maybe that is a form of faith in itself.
It's about choosing to believe even when we don't have all the answers. Even when we're surrounded by pain and doubt.
Exactly.
And that's such a powerful message.
It is.
Especially for anyone who's ever felt lost or alone in their suffering. It reminds us we're not expected to have it all figured out. That it's okay to ask questions, to wrestle with doubt, to seek support and comfort from others.
And it also reminds us that even in the darkness, there are still glimmers of light. There are acts of kindness, moments of grace that remind us that love and hope are still present in the world.
It's about choosing to see those glimmers, to hold on to those moments, and to let them fuel our own acts of compassion and resilience.
And maybe in those acts, we find a deeper connection with God, a sense of purpose and meaning that goes beyond the pain and confusion of suffering.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation.
It has.
And I think it's fitting that we're ending this part of our deep dive with this focus on choice. On the power we have to decide how we respond to suffering in ways that affirm our faith and our humanity, even when the answers seem hard to find.
It's about choosing to believe that even in the darkest night, the dawn will come.
And that even in brokenness, there's always potential for healing and growth and transformation.
Absolutely.
But before we wrap up completely,
I
know you've put together a 10-point summary.
I have.
For our listeners.
A
way to sort of condense those key takeaways from our exploration of Rabbi Kushner's work.
I think these points, they not only sum up what we've talked about, but they also give us a framework for handling those times when life throws us curveballs.
I'm ready whenever you are.
All right. Let's recap what we've learned from Rabbi Kushner about why bad things happen to good people. Point number 1. Bad things do happen to good people. It's universal. It makes us question everything. Like, is life even fair? What about God? We might feel angry, confused, even betrayed. Those feelings are normal. It's okay to feel them.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that suffering is a part of life.
Exactly.
It doesn't pick and choose.
Point number 2. Traditional explanations. Like, suffering is punishment for sin. They often don't hold up. They don't always fit what we see happening around us. And they can make us feel guilty.
Like we did something wrong.
Exactly.
As we talked about, sometimes it just isn't a direct link between our actions and our suffering.
Point number 3. Finding meaning in tragedy can be nice, but we have to acknowledge that sometimes things just happen randomly. There's no bigger reason, at least not one that we can see right away. This randomness is tough to swallow.
It is.
But it's part of living in a world where we're not in total control.
Letting go of needing a reason for everything can actually be freeing. Even if it feels weird at first.
Point number 4. We may never completely get why certain people suffer. But pain, physical and emotional, is part of what it means to be human. It can be a warning sign.
Like alerting us to danger.
Exactly.
Or telling us to get help.
And it can also help us grow, change for the better, and appreciate life more.
It's about recognizing that pain, even though it's awful, often serves a purpose. Even if we don't see it right away.
Point number 5. Mortality. Hard to think about, but it gives our lives a sense of urgency and meaning. Makes us realize how precious time is. Encourages us to make choices that really matter to us.
Knowing our time is limited can inspire us to live more fully, to cherish the people we love, to seize the day.
Exactly. Point number 6. What sets us apart from animals is our ability to think about right and wrong and make choices based on that. This freedom is risky.
We can make mistakes.
We can hurt people. But it also lets us experience love, compassion, and create amazing things.
It's about understanding that our capacity for good and bad goes hand in hand with our ability to choose, to shape our lives, and to impact the world.
Point number 7. God doesn't stop all suffering. Not because he doesn't care, but because he values our freedom. This doesn't mean he's not with us in our pain. It means he respects our ability to make our own decisions, even if they lead to bad outcomes.
It's a complex idea.
It is.
But it suggests that God's love isn't about controlling us. It's about empowering us and respecting our individual journeys.
Point number 8. When bad things happen, it's easy to feel guilty, to blame ourselves or others, even to feel jealous. But if we hold on to those feelings, they can really hurt us. We got to remember, we're not always in control. Sometimes things happen and we just don't understand why.
It's about letting go of the need to find fault, whether in ourselves or others, and focusing on moving forward with compassion, with understanding.
Point number 9. Prayer might not change what's happening around us,
Yeah.
but it can help us connect with others and find strength within ourselves.
Right.
It's a way to express our fears and hopes and to connect with something bigger than ourselves.
It's about understanding that prayer isn't a magic spell to get what we want.
No.
But it's a powerful practice.
Yes.
For finding hope, gratitude, and connection.
Yeah.
Even when things are rough.
And finally, point number 10.
Okay.
We might not find meaning in suffering right when it happens, but we can create meaning over time by focusing on how we respond, how we grow, and how we use those experiences to help other people. It's
about realizing that even in the darkest times, we still have the power to choose hope, to look for healing, and to find ways to make our lives a testament to resilience, to love, to that strength inside each of us.
Those are the 10 key takeaways.
That's a lot to think about.
It is. Take your time with it.
Yeah.
Come back to these points as you keep pondering these questions about life, suffering, and faith.
This has been a truly rich and insightful exploration
Yes.
of Rabbi Kushner's work.
Yeah.
And what really strikes me is this emphasis on choice.
Yeah.
Yes, bad things happen.
Right.
But we get to choose how we react.
Absolutely.
We can choose to find meaning.
Yeah.
To seek support.
Right.
To connect with others.
Yeah.
And to hold on to hope. Even when we're hurting and unsure.
And maybe in making those choices,
Yeah.
we find a faith that isn't about avoiding the tough stuff.
Right.
But about embracing the whole human experience.
Yeah.
The good and the bad.
Right.
The highs and the lows.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Until next time, keep searching, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deep.